How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Hot Takes with Holmes here on Radio Free Radford. My name is Blake Holmes, and I'm here with my co-host once again, Isaiah Addair. Stick around with us. We're going to be talking about the recent action around March Madness and the National Basketball Association. And ladies and gentlemen, the Final Four is finally here, set to tip off in San Antonio this weekend. But first, let's talk about what got us here, the Elite Eight. A round that we were all looking forward to, and some surprising games, but also some not so surprising outcomes. So, in the Elite Eight, coming out of the South region was not. I don't think anyone really, not many people drew this up. Coming out of the South, a 9v11 seed, Kansas State taking on the Loyola Chicago Ramblers, a feel-good story of the tournament. And Loyola Chicago dominated this game. I mean, it wasn't even close. I watched this, and it was 78-62, the final score. Kansas State was never really having a chance once the game got tipped. Loyola Chicago shot the ball very well in this game, and they move on to the Final Four, and they are tied for the highest numbered seed to ever make a Final Four game. So, really, it's still a heck of an accomplishment from Kansas State to get here. They knocked off some very impressive teams to get here, but Loyola Chicago moves on from the South region. In the West region, we had the Michigan Wolverines taking on the Florida State Seminoles. This was a game that Isaiah, I believe, now you did not pick Florida State, did you? But you had Michigan going out of the West region. So, and that pick remained true. Michigan knocked off the Seminoles 58-54. And they will move on to the Final Four once again. I believe since the last time they made it was with Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway Jr. In the East region, you had the Villanova Wildcats taking on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I made a statement on the last show when the Sweet 16 was around saying that, to me, Texas Tech was a Sharpie to beat, to beat Purdue. I got that part right. I did say that I think they would fall to Villanova, and I was correct here. Villanova takes home the win, 71-59, and you gotta believe if you're a Radford fan, you want Nova going all the way. You want to say you lost to the national champions. So, Villanova, not even really a pretty dominant fashion, 71-59 in this game. Excuse me. Once again, Nova does what they do best. They just shot the ball really well. Well, some did, some didn't. A big game from another, I believe he's a redshirt freshman. His name's Spillman. Really, this game was more of a momentum game than anything. Just big haymakers thrown left and right, and Nova moves on to the Final Four for the second time in 3 years. Then the last game, and to me the most exciting game by far, the Kansas Jayhawks knocking out the Duke Blue Devils. You know, you may have seen it on live, you may have seen it on social media. The famous, was it a charge? Was Wendell Carter, was that a charge? Was it a charge or a block that they called? It could have gone either way. To me, in the situation that it was given, the situation, the time, everything that played into that, that should be a charge. That should not, you don't give that to, in the Elite Eight, that's not someone's fifth foul. That shouldn't be. You shouldn't foul out because of a call like that. I really don't agree with that. But you had to live with it. Grayson Allen came real close to making a game winner in this game. They went to overtime, and Kansas gets the win 85-81 with Trevon Duval for Duke playing big in this one. So based on I don't know if you saw it, but based on your decision and your thoughts, should the charge or the block on Wendell Carter Jr. have been called a charge, Isaiah?
In my opinion, no. I think just because officiating, well, we've seen it all throughout all the sports this year, officiating has been questionable at best in big moments. And I believe this is one of those situations where you have to be more meticulous than ever. You can't make the same mistakes. It's one thing to make it in regular season, and even earlier in the tournament if it doesn't affect the game. But a questionable call, if you're going to make a call in the final seconds of an Elite Eight matchup between a number 1 seed and a number 2 seed, it better be the right call, and it better be without a doubt the right call. So if it's, I guess in the NFL it'd kind of be like a overturning like a fumble or something. You can't overturn it unless there's without a doubt proof that you were initially wrong. And I think that's what it should be. I think that's what penalties in suspect penalties in big moments should be in any sport. should be if it's not obvious, if it's not a blatant foul, then it shouldn't be called. And so that's where I stand with that.
So to recap, in the Final Four, that does begin Saturday at 6:09 p.m. That is tip coverage will probably start about 6 o'clock, maybe 5:30. That is the Loyola Chicago Ramblers taking on the Michigan Wolverines, and the Villanova Wildcats versus the Kansas Jayhawks, a 1v1 matchup in that one. And then the other one was 11v3. So I think it's been a very exciting tournament, and it really has lived up to what we like to call March Madness. And really, that's what brings down to it. Who out of all these four teams, obviously we saw potentially two of them. Some people may have seen three. I don't know of too many people who legitimately saw Loyola Chicago making it as far as they have. So, Isaiah, who is your favorite at this point to take home the NCAA championship for March Madness this year and become the 2018 NCAA champions?
I don't know. Last week I said Michigan, but after Loyola Chicago putting a beat down on Kansas State, I don't know. I might have to shift my pick to Villanova. Just because you can't lose a game if you make more baskets than the other team. I mean, unless twos versus threes, there's that thing. But the thing is, Villanova shoots threes very well. They shoot from anywhere very well. They get the shots. They go down at a high rate. And if you make shots at a high rate than the other team, and we've seen them play, especially playing against Radford, like they take just as many shots as the other team. So if you take just as many shots, and you're knocking them down at such a high rate that they are, and you have players like Brunson and Bridges, I don't know. I think Kansas could be a tough matchup, and whoever they play against in the championship could be a tough matchup, but I think they're going to run away with it.
It's one thing to have the shooting power that Villanova has, you can shoot less shots and lose the rebounding battle, but because you're making so many shots and a lot of them being three-point shots and how lethal their outside shooting really is, there's not many teams that can compete with the firepower that the Wildcats have, and Bridges, Brunson, now Spellman, with the emergence of these players. And like I've said before, I think Jalen Brunson's one of the best players in college basketball. So to have that firepower at your arsenal, Kansas is a very good basketball team. I haven't given them enough credit. I believe that they do not get past Villanova. I would love to see Loyola Chicago win a championship. You have no idea how much I'd love to see it happen. I keep telling my friends, it's like I'm a Tennessee basketball fan and I'm a Radford basketball fan, and so I'd have the two teams that beat my teams in the NCAA championship. So I couldn't complain at that point. But I got to give it to Villanova. I mean, when you have a polarizing player like Brunson and Bridges, and Jay Wright, one of the best college basketball coaches out there, Villanova has everything going for them in the right direction. So, speaking of Loyola, the Loyola and Sister Jean effect. It's a real feel-good story. The 98-year-old team chaplain didn't even have them going out of the Sweet 16, but here they are in the Final Four. Now, it's a feel-good story, and every tournament has one, but it's time to be realistic and think, do the Rambos actually have a chance at the chip? Do they have a chance to take it all home to Loyola? I mean, it's a pressing question. Do they really have that? So I'm going to go ahead and let you answer that.
Say making it to the championship, I would say yes. Michigan played a close game against Florida State, and Florida State's not a slouch, but we saw Kansas State knock off UNC. And Loyola Chicago, like I just said a second ago, beat them by 16. Or not UNC, I'm sorry, it was Kentucky. But that Kansas State just destroyed. But again, Loyola Chicago beat Kansas State by 16 points. And now they're playing a Michigan team who has played some really good teams, has defeated some really good teams. But I don't know, I could totally see Loyola Chicago making it to the championship. But then having them play against Villanova, I don't know. I think their odds probably would look similar to, slightly better than Radford to beat Villanova. I would say 20-80, but there's a chance. It's a realistic chance, it's just not a good one.
The problem I have with the two teams coming out of the South and the West region, obviously Michigan and Loyola Chicago, they've really been, well, Michigan, not necessarily as bad as Loyola Chicago. They have been beneficiaries of a little bit of a weak side of the tournament, and it's not necessarily now Loyola Chicago's was, but Michigan's wasn't necessarily. It wasn't that it was a bad like a bad region. It wasn't a bad set of teams. It was just the circumstances that they got allowed them to make a little bit more of a run. I mean, first round you play the 14 seed Montana. You know, not a game that many people expect you to lose. So they win that one pretty handily. Then you go to the next round. You play a pretty good Houston team. They were trending up at that time. I give Michigan credit for that win. That is a very good win against the Cougars. Then you play a 7 seed Texas A&M, and once again, albeit they did eliminate UNC and played them very well. Michigan played a 7 seed on their way to the tournament, on the way to the Elite Eight, and then they play a 9. And they beat that 9 only by 4 points. Like, Michigan is not, both of these teams, Loyola Chicago, and I can't really talk about their division much because, they beat in the first round, they knocked off Miami. You know, a lot of people may have had them going to the Sweet 16, but not much farther. Then they beat Tennessee. Pretty decent win right there, a 3 seed. Then they go, but they avoided the 2 seed Cincinnati, which again I said wasn't a team that I thought was really worthy of true championship aspirations to me. So Nevada knocks them off, and then they play a 7 seed Nevada, and then they go and play Kansas State. If you compare it, it's really Michigan and Loyola Chicago seeding wise have almost an exact same, except Loyola Chicago's was better. Even though Loyola Chicago played in the weaker region, they played better teams on their way to here. So Loyola Chicago is more battle tested in a way than Michigan is. However, I do believe that Michigan is trending up at the right time. Going all the way, winning that Big Ten tournament was huge, was paramount for the Wolverines this year. And they've carried that momentum into the NCAA tournament. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game. And obviously, Loyola Chicago has a chance. There's a reason an 11 seed has never made the championship game. They run out of gas, and it's a great. You know, we all remember George Mason. We remember VCU, but you know the important things about them. They only made it to the Final Four. The Final Four is when the real stage is set, and you see what they're made of. And you know, Loyola Chicago may break that mold. I'd love to see it happen, but I do believe that Michigan gets this win, and I think Villanova beats Kansas, and we'll see a Michigan and Villanova national championship.
I mean, Loyola Chicago has been here before. Given it was 55 years ago, they've been there before. Different league completely, before the league was completely segregated or desegregated. But I don't know, like you said, Michigan's trending up at the perfect time. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a hard-fought battle. I could see either team coming out on top. I think it's a really even matchup, though, for the most part. Like you said, the schedules have been pretty even for the most part. Michigan played harder teams during the regular season. But I mean, that's the benefit of being in a Power 5 conference. But yeah, I think it's a pretty even game. It's going to be interesting.
I mean, really, I'm just going to go by and compare. You know, in the first round, Loyola Chicago takes on Miami. Michigan takes on Montana. A little bit of a difficulty change goes to Loyola. In the round of 32, Loyola knocks off the Volunteers. Michigan knocks off the Cougars. Even matchup. You know, like I said, Houston was looking very good by the end of this season, and Tennessee was looking okay. They had just lost the SEC championship, but they were still not a bad basketball team. So I'd call it even right there. Then you go and Michigan plays Texas A&M with Loyola Chicago beating Nevada. Both teams coming off of number 2 seed wins. So again, another even matchup there. Then a Kansas State who just knocked off Kentucky versus a Florida State who knocked off Gonzaga. I mean, it's even, but I still gotta give that edge because Loyola Chicago got past Miami, and I didn't expect them to really. Yeah, I made a bracket where NCAA the chaos happens in NCAA, and they won it all, and that's the only bracket I have where the national championship's still alive. I mean, look, I made that as a joke. I never expected them to even come close to getting past Miami, but you see what they're doing, and I guess this is their way of saying keep doubting us. We're going to keep pushing. Pardon my pun, they're going to keep rambling on to the national championship. So there's always a chance, and I'd love to see it happen, but I do think Michigan wins this game. And once again, the never-before-seen South region, a 9v11 That doesn't happen very often. And then, I mean, the Sweet 16, there wasn't a single team within the first four seeds. So, I guess, like I said, Loyola Chicago got a little bit of a benefit from a weak division with obviously the first number 16 seed to ever beat a one in men's college basketball in UNBC. Getting past Virginia, that obviously knocks off that defensive powerhouse in the Cavaliers. Then you have Nevada beats Cincinnati. That's the 2 seed that you got to watch out for. Loyola Chicago took care of the 3 seed themselves. The 4 seed also lost in the first round to Buffalo, pretty handily too. So these teams, they weren't what they were made out to be, or it was just great March performances. But Loyola Chicago really got the benefit of a weak division. And they'll have their work cut out for them if they really want to get to that next level.
I've got a question though. Was it a weaker division or was it stronger? Because these teams that were seeded so low performed so well. But was it a weaker team? Because we even saw UMBC. They put up a fight against Kansas State. They lost. But, I mean, they held Kansas State to 50. Kansas State scored 61 on Kentucky. So was it that it was a weaker division or that the 1 seeds might have been seeded too high and the lower seeds seeded too low? So it might have been a more even division. Just the talent more spread out, possibly.
And you can make that argument. I will say one thing: UMBCU is unheard of because I mean, if you look at it in a game versus Buffalo earlier this year, they lost by like 40. I mean, and that is an NCAA tournament team. Don't get me wrong, but UMBC got to the tournament on automatic bid. Same reason Radford did. Same reason that Penn did. The University of Penn. So. And Penn also came very close to beating Kansas in that first round. And in fact, they've been one of the closest teams to play with Kansas all year, other than Duke. But really, in the grand scheme of things, it's a matter of circumstance. You can look at it both ways. There were some teams that you could have considered were too high. Like I said, Cincinnati, I don't think should have been a 2 seed. But you could also make the case that maybe Kansas State shouldn't have been a 9. Maybe that Miami should have been lower than a 6. You don't know that, and it's just you could argue both sides. But at the end of the day, Loyola Chicago, I think, really has earned their way in. There's one thing to be called a Cinderella. There's another thing to be called a true Cinderella, and I think that's what Loyola Chicago, they escalated because Cinderellas, they make it to the elite. Honestly, Kansas State. In most seasons, most years, would be considered a Cinderella. But you see, Loyola Chicago has taken the next step, and they're becoming the true Cinderella. And they could be the first one to ever win a national championship. And I believe the highest seed to ever do it it's happened once, maybe in NCAA history, was Villanova, another familiar team right here at the top. They took out Georgetown back in the 1980s with Patrick Ewing. So hasn't been a seed higher than an 8 win a national championship since then, and there's only been like 3 8 seeds to make the national championship. No seed above that has ever even made it. So Loyola's playing with house money right here, and it could be an interesting game. They would definitely put it all on the line for Michigan. No holds barred. I expect this to be a fantastic game and a very fun game to watch from the Ramblers and the Wolverines. So, if you're like me, if you're like most of America, your bracket's destroyed in shambles. I'm not even going to try to describe how bad it's the worst bracket I've ever filled out, and I actually felt kind of confident about it going in. That's just the type of tournament we've had this year. So, the Final Four, as I just stated, we're going to go through and we're going to try to pick our Final Four and see who wins the national championship. So, Isaiah, I want to let you start the first game, Loyola Chicago taking on Michigan.
Give me the true Cinderellas, Loyola Chicago. Sister Jean's been a dominant performer on the sideline. I don't know what it is about her. I actually saw a map of the Final Four teams, and instead of having the Ramblers logo, they had her face. And it's just something about her. And I honestly think that it's kind of not really giving them an edge, but the team has something to play for. Going through high school sports, the coaches are always like, just play for something. Doesn't matter what it is, play for something. And they're playing for something, all right. They're playing for Sister Jean. They're playing for, the town of Chicago. I don't know. It really excites me. I think Loyola Chicago, like as we were talking, the schedules are pretty evenly matched. Would give them the edge. And I think they could pull it out, make it to the championship.
I got to tell you, I just said I think Michigan wins. Loyola Chicago, the reason why Sister Jean is she's just, we've used this word a ton on this show. It's polarizing. It's a figure that instantly draws your attention to that team and says, look, here, look at this aspect of this team that they have, not that maybe this team doesn't. So when you think of polarizing figures, you think of Coach Mike Krzyzewski. You think of like Bill Self. You think of maybe a certain aspect of the university. And you think of fans, you think of Sister Jean. She's polarizing when it comes to looking at this. I actually retweeted something the other day. I believe it was former ESPN analyst Bill Simmons put it out, and it was a remix of Michael Jackson's "Billie Jean," but it was for Sister Jean, and I thought that was funny. But without that fan, without that certain story going with it, no one's gonna even think of that, and that's part of the reason why I think Loyola Chicago just keeps going, keeps trending up. It's because they're gaining all this support, and because fans know like this is it. This is the example of a true Cinderella that we could possibly see. For that reason, I'm changing my pick, and I am also going to pick Loyola Chicago because all the support that they've gained, all the way they've played in this tournament, they've won, they've blown out teams, and they've also okay, put it this way. In their first 3 games in this tournament, they won them by a combined total of 4 points. Then they demolished Kansas State. So they've played in a breakout game, but they've played in close games. And that's part of what I'm saying is battle tested. Like they know both sides of the story here. They say, well, if we pull away, we know not to take our foot off the gas. We know to keep the pedal to the metal. But we also know how it takes to take it one possession at a time and find a way to win these close games. And I think that's going to be the edge that ultimately puts them in the championship and to put them the highest seeded team to ever make the national championship. In the next game, the Villanova Wildcats and the Kansas Jayhawks, heavyweights fighting back and forth. A lot of haymakers going to be thrown in this game. To me, I'll go ahead and make the first pick here. I'm picking Villanova. The shooting is lethal. They're a smart basketball team. They don't turn the ball over a ton. Like I said, their field goal percentage is insane. Jay Wright is one of the best coaches in college basketball, and give me Nova over the Kansas Jayhawks.
Yeah, either way, obviously there's going to be a number 1 seed in that side of the bracket for the championship, and I will say Villanova. And honestly, I like Kansas, representing the Big 12. I really like Kansas, but Villanova may run away with it, and the score differential may be more than the Michigan Loyola Chicago game, just because Kansas sometimes, like you said earlier, last week you said you couldn't completely buy into Kansas, and against Villanova I'm not either, because Villanova, they knock the shots down and they will take your life from you if they see the chance, they will sweep everything out from under you and keep on running, and I think it could cause Kansas to collapse and kind of panic. So I think Villanova could run away with it potentially, and they're going to be matched up against the Ramblers in the championship.
Let me read to you a few stats about that Villanova game against Texas Tech, and I'm going to point out. Jalen Brunson, 4 of 14, 0 of 4 from deep. Bridges, 3 of 10, 0 of 5 from deep. The entire game, they shot 16.7% from 3, and they won by 12. This is obviously an off night, and they're still dominating. That's my whole thing. Kansas has played in close games the entire tournament, almost, essentially. I'm looking through the brackets right now. The only game, look at that. Lost to Penn. They did beat Penn by 16, but Penn had a lead at one point. Penn was very close with them for the entire game. They go and they only beat Seton Hall by 4. They beat Clemson by 4. They beat Duke by 4. These are close games they're playing, and that's kind of what I know. I said about battle tested. Getting that only gets you so far. When Nova's doing what they're doing to the teams, they beat Radford by almost 30. They beat the next team they played. I believe it was who was it after Radford? It was Alabama. They beat Alabama by over 20. They beat West Virginia in a close game for a long time. Still beat them by 12. Each game this tournament has been by over 10 points. And I think Kansas is probably as good, if not better, than any team they've played so far. But give me Nova in that they've been winning in such dominant fashion. I'm not going to pick against them right now. And as much as I hate to say it, that prediction remains true in the national championship. I don't want to pick against Villanova right now. I think they win it all this year. I think they win it all for the second time in 3 years. And again, a hell of a run by Loyola Chicago if it happens. But I really think that Villanova finds a way to take it all home for the second time in 3 years.
As much as I want Sister Jean to get a championship ring, which if they win, she will get one. There's no denying that. But as much as I want it to happen, and I love a great underdog story, an 11 seed finishing as the champions, at least for the summer, that'd just be insane. Help the recruiting class and everything, but I don't see it. Like Blake was saying, the way Villanova's playing, you can't pick against them. They dominate on an off night. Now, is the trouble from the field something to be concerned about? The trouble from the field they have with Texas Tech, is it something to be concerned about? I don't think. Like we saw when they played against Radford. Radford played great defense, but they didn't block shots. And like we talked about the past few weeks, if the ball gets up in the air, it at least has a chance to fall. And if you can't block the shots, that's what happens. And I mean, they got good releases. Their form's great. It's hard to block them. And I mean, their shot selection is pretty solid too. So you can still play good defense. Like West Virginia, great defense. And like you said, it was a close game for most of the game, but then they were able to pull away. So is the trouble from the field against Texas Tech something to worry about? Possibly, but I just can't pick against them.
We're gonna flash back also with this tournament. It's such a just a huge moment in sports history. UMBC, the Retrievers, knocking off UVA. To me, it's the biggest upset in college basketball history. I can't think of a game that really. Only thing that could have even come close was Jim Valvano winning a national championship with that Wolfpack team, the 7 seed. But I think this is the best upset, and to do it in such a dominating fashion the way they did, beating by 20, a 1 seed, it's really unheard of. But the ultimate question to ask with this is this game the biggest upset in sports history? You put this on a bigger stage, and you think of all of the great things that have happened. Your Miracle on Ices, your Appy State Michigans, your Giants versus Patriots, and you put this on the bigger stage. And does this UMBC game really, match well with them? And does it really match? Is this the greatest upset in sports history?
Well, you named off some good ones, and as much as I say yes, it is the biggest upset in college basketball history, maybe even basketball history potentially. But you have those games like you were saying, the Giants against the undefeated Patriots. It's a great game. App State versus Michigan. And I think if UMBC is the greatest upset in sports history, it's because no one knew what UMBC stood for. I saw on Twitter some people ask if it meant umbilical cord, because they just don't know what it means. Like, obviously we know now it's University of Maryland, Baltimore County, but no one knew that before unless you went there or lived in Baltimore County. But I don't know, just because you named off those, I'm going to go with something that I think could arguably be the biggest upset in sports history, and it involves my favorite athlete of all time losing. Super Bowl 36, St. Louis Rams versus the New England Patriots. No-name quarterback Tom Brady gets his first ring in that game. And yeah, it was the beginning of the Spygate era, but even putting that aside, great game. Kurt Warner still broke his own record for passing yards in the Super Bowl. But Bill Belichick and Tom Brady started their dynasty. It may have been the most impactful game in all of sports history, just because the dynasty that it started and the dynasty that it ended with, the potential dynasty that it ended with the Rams. Because it was one of the last times they played together for 2 more seasons, but barring injuries and everything, it was the only extended time that meaningful playing time actually, Kurt Warner got to play with Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Marshall Faulk. And Mike March was the coach then, and after that, he had a stint with Chicago, but other than that, he's not been a head coach again. And I think at Chicago, he might have just been an OC. So it might have been the most meaningful game of all time. And just because the Rams were starting a dynasty and the Patriots had a no-name quarterback, funny to imagine Tom Brady being a no-name, but the Patriots had a no-name quarterback. And I think just because not just the upset that took place, but how much it just changed the landscape of sports, I would go with Super Bowl 36.
The one that I'm going to be talking about, I already mentioned. I don't know how you can think of bigger upset than the Miracle on Ice. This is all the way back before we were even born, before we even knew what sports were. Obviously, back in the 1980, I believe, Winter Olympics it was. The Soviet Union. It's the height of the Cold War. Tensions are high between the United States and Soviet Union, obviously, and the Soviets had won 5 of the past 6 gold medals, in ice hockey for the Winter Olympics. They were heavy favorites to win it again, and the United States took a little bit of a bold approach, and they said, we're not going to use professionals. We're going to use amateur and college hockey players, guys who didn't play professionally, where the Soviets were full of those guys. And it was the youngest team the USA has ever fielded in a Winter Olympics. It's something that's straight out of fantasy. I mean, this ragtag group of young players taking on this team of professional, bona fide superstars in the ice hockey field, going into the medal rounds in the height of a major conflict between their countries, and the underdogs won. It's straight out of a fantasy book that people may think, and they may throw in the trash, like, that will never happen. But you see that, and who could forget? We didn't watch it live, but I know you've seen the highlights, and I've seen it myself. Who could forget Al Michaels? Do you believe in miracles? I mean, it's magical. It's something that you want to see. You always root for an underdog, but you don't realize how big of a scale it really gets put on it until they actually succeed. And the best part about that is, you can make the case the Giants beating the Pats. They didn't win the Super Bowl in that game. UMBC here, they lost in the next round. The U.S. men's team didn't. They went on, they beat Finland in that golden final, ended up winning the gold medal that year. To me, that's so impressive, and just taking in if it's a regular hockey game, so be it, not a big deal. But the young guys, like I said, this ragtag team taking on this superstar team in the height of the Cold War, the situation outside of the sport adding into that to me is the biggest upset in sports history. And every big upset you got to think has that one thing that sticks out to them. If you've seen the clip, you remember, do you believe in miracles for the rest of your life? And that's what makes that clip that's what makes that game so magical.
I like that one thing we both pointed out, that our biggest upsets were bigger than just that moment. They were bigger than just that game. And I think that's what it comes down to. The upset has to change something. It has to be meaningful further than just the game. Because for most people, the sport is more than just a game. Like what in my situation, it was the end of a dynasty, but the start of another. The last time that such a good core of a team played together, and the first time such a good core of a team played together. And yours was national and like Cold War based, and just a good feel-good story, underdog story. And I just like how we both went further than just the game itself.
So that's all we're going to be talking about again. Final Four starts Saturday. Be sure to tune into that. National Championship will be Monday. I believe it's usually about 8 o'clock or so on a Monday night, which I've never quite understood that. But all the games will be played in San Antonio from here on out, so be sure to tune into that. And moving into the NBA, the biggest news coming out by far, Stephen Curry, superstar point guard, 2-time MVP, known as one of the greatest shooters of all time, just had a grade 2 MCL sprain. Whenever it happened, they said he'd be reevaluated in 3 weeks to be about 2 now. So the ultimate question is, and we know a lot of people want to say that Curry necessarily isn't the best player in the Warriors anymore. It's his cohort, Kevin Durant. What does this do to the Warriors? And trying to maybe make a push for the 1 seed, or maybe they seem content where they are. But what does this do for the Warriors moving forward to the end of the season?
I honestly think right now it doesn't change much. The Curry situation with Clay being hurt, Dre being sick, KD being hurt, obviously it changes. The team's different because they're pretty much playing with a bench. Not even counting Zaza, he's a bench player in my book. But I think it doesn't really change much in the end. Because unless, like we were talking about before the show, if it comes down to a 3-3 tie going into Game 7 of the first round of playoffs, they don't need Steph. And I honestly think no matter who they play against in the first round, I think KD can get it done. Clay can get it done. Draymond's going to be healthy. So I think that'll be fine. They're going to need him after that first round. And there's one specific team we'll get into in a second that I think could upset the Warriors in the first round, potentially, if Steph's not back in. But I think initially that it's not really room for an alarm. Just like the year they lost to the Cavs, you don't want him coming back early and struggling through injuries for the rest of the playoffs. So I think just let it play out. Let him rest.
I have to say this. I don't care if you don't like the Warriors. I don't care if you don't like Kevin Durant for what he did. I never was one that got upset for what he did. He made a move that was good for his career, for what he thought was best for him to get a ring. I cannot physically understand why someone would legitimately hate Stephen Curry on a basketball court. He's arrogant, I know, but so is, LeBron James. So is every other superstar in the NBA. It just happens that every superstar, almost in every sport, there's a sort of arrogance. There is a sort of confidence that comes off of him that really makes his game fun to watch. You watch Stephen Curry to see him start running down the court as soon as he lets go of a basketball. You watch for these deep threes. You watch for these insane finishes around the rim, and taking that away from Golden State's game right now, to me, could hurt them a lot. And it's not just because, it's going to hurt anyone when your superstar goes down. But to me, it's almost ruining their rhythm of play. You use this time to get into a good rhythm before the playoffs. Maybe sit them to a game or two before the playoffs start. But you play them, you get into a rhythm going into the playoffs, and you keep that rhythm. That's what makes championship teams. You make that rhythm, and you keep it going all the way through the playoffs. With Curry out like this, that puts the Warriors at a disadvantage. They won't get that opportunity to do that, especially if Curry's going to be the dominant ball handler. KD's a big guy when it comes down to who handles the ball when you actually get set and you start running the plays. But who's going to be bringing the ball down the floor? Who's going to be doing all that? Oh, it's Steph. They need him to be able to do that rhythm, and with him hurt right now, they're not going to get that chance to do that. So, to me, this could hurt them more than people are giving them credit. I still think they'll be fine, especially at least until the Western Conference Finals. But I think that this could end up playing a bigger part than a lot of people want to give it credit right now.
I think if he's still hurt after the first round, it could jeopardize their chance of getting to the Western Conference Finals, given they can still make it because they're just so talented. But like you said, just the rhythm, the confidence he brings to the team, the leadership. KD's been on record saying he's not a leader. Steph is the leader of the team, and even though Steph offered for KD to be the face of the team, face of the franchise, KD knows that Steph's the leader, and he's okay with that. And I think anybody who watches him play knows that Steph is the leader of the team. So I don't even know if they get past the second round if he's not back, but I expect him to be back by then.
Some exciting basketball happening last night, starting off with the Denver Nuggets traveling to Toronto and falling to the number one seed in the East, 114-110. Denver had a lead for a long time, and a fourth quarter collapse allowed the Raptors to get back ahead in this game. The San Antonio Spurs lost on the road to the Washington Wizards, 116-106. The Cleveland Cavaliers lose on the road to the Miami Heat, 98-79. I believe LeBron, ever since he came back to Cleveland, he has never won a game in Miami as a member of the Cavs since he left Miami. Interesting stat there. So, and Dwayne Wade blocked LeBron in this game, and it was all good fun. But this was a good game, but the Miami Heat blew them out, beat them by 19. So, and the Heat are not a bad basketball team. Watch them trend up. They're 7th in the East right now. So, and as of right now, they would get the Boston Celtics in the first round. The Chicago Bulls traveling to Houston, a game that not many people honestly really paid a whole lot of attention to, and got blown out as usual, as you would expect, 86-118. The Rockets still trucking along for that number one seed in the Western Conference. The Portland Trail Blazers playing against the New Orleans Pelicans, very good anticipated game. Portland takes the win, 107-103. The Indiana Pacers traveled to Golden State and won, 92-81. Once again, we mentioned Golden State's not playing is without their stars right now, and a lot of people are wanting to criticize Steve Kerr for the job he's doing coaching. But have you seen what he's had to deal with this year? He hasn't had to deal with this in his entire coaching tenure with the Warriors, with the injuries on this type of scale. And finally, the Milwaukee Bucks losing to the Clippers on the road, 98-105 in the Staples Center. So our hypothetical for the day, something we like to do every single week here. Coach Steve Kerr, as we've mentioned, said that Curry will not play in the first round. There's no chance he will play in the first round, is the exact quote that Steve Kerr used. Out of all the lower teams right now are the teams that have not been eliminated from the playoffs and a lower seed in the Western Conference. Who has the best chance to knock them off in the first round, if any of them do?
I would say if anyone has a chance right now, it would not be someone that's in the playoff spot, it'd be someone that could potentially be. And that would be the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, they're at the 10 now, correct? So they have to make their way up to the 7 to play against Golden State. It's totally possible because just how wide open the NFC West is. or the Western Conference. Sorry, I got football on my mind, but just how wide open the Western Conference is. Denver could definitely do it, but if it's not Denver, I don't see anybody beating them. Just the simple fact that just the front court for Denver, Nikola Jokic, he's a monster, an all-around monster. Triple-double machine, set the record for fastest triple-double in a game this year. I think it was like 16 minutes. Crazy athlete. And Golden State doesn't have anybody to counter that. They got Zaza Pachulia, JaVale McGee. And just to keep in mind, that's the only way I could see Golden State possibly losing in the first round, because the team we see in Golden State right now, they're playing with their bench. Yeah, they might have a deep bench, but they're not starters, and they're not starters for a reason. So it's obviously going to be a much improved team when playoffs come around, but Denver's the only team that I can even see by any stretch beating Golden State without Steph.
Fun fact for those that you don't know this, the Denver Nuggets were actually the first team, 8 seed, to ever knock off a 1 seed in a playoff series. Knocked off the Seattle Supersonics. I believe it was like 1992, 1993 maybe, or maybe 95. But to me, you're talking about the Nuggets. Obviously, me being a Nuggets fan, I can tell you, Jokic is a monster. We know that by now, but he is an absolute liability on defense. He's getting destroyed in the post every single night, and really the only reason the front court's defense has been even somewhat respectable, even if you could call it that, in here recently, is because of the emergence and the coming back of Paul Millsap. Millsap really being one of the defensive specialists on the team, but Jokic is a liability on offense, on defense. He's a great player on offense. The Nuggets also hold themselves back with trying to play Will Barton way too much, Wilson Chandler playing way too much. They're sitting Kenneth Faried for entire games. They're not really getting the most out of their potential they could be getting. So I agree that if they can get hot, they're a team that you could watch out for, but I don't even honestly expect them to make the playoffs at this point. The team that I think has the best chance to do it is honestly Utah. You got a big man like Rudy Gobert who plays fantastic defense. And I know he'd be guarding Zaza Pachulia, but you can make the shift. You could say, all right, Rudy, we want you to guard Draymond. We want you to be on him, and Derek Favors can guard Zaza or something like that. And Derek Favors isn't bad either. You're telling me you have a lineup of Ricky Rubio, Donovan Mitchell, Joe Ingles, let's see, Derek Favors, and Rudy Gobert. Obviously, Joe Ingles might be the weak link there, but let's not forget Joe Ingles, lethal outside shooter, insanely good outside shooter. Just to me, it would have to be the Jazz, and they're slated. If the season ended today, that's who they would play in the first round. So give me the Jazz and my team to make it out of the first round. And I don't think I don't think any team will beat the Warriors in the first round, but I think that's the team with the best chance to do it right now. Speaking of playoffs. And the playoff standings currently in the Eastern Conference, they stand pretty similar. The number 1 seed is the Toronto Raptors. The Boston Celtics are number 2. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the number 3. And clinching a playoff spot for the first time since 2012, The Philadelphia 76ers sitting in at number 4 in the Eastern Conference. The Indiana Pacers also clinched a playoff spot at the number 5 seed. And then fighting out for seeding wise, the Washington Wizards at number 6, the Miami Heat at number 7, and the Milwaukee Bucks at number 8, which they're all probably going to make the playoffs. And the next team is the Pistons. They're like 5 games back. But it's just a matter of seeding at this point, and I guess and theoretically it is possible for each one of those teams to miss the playoffs at this point. I think they all might need like one more win, and they will clinch a spot. The Western Conference, different story. Number 1 seed, the Houston Rockets, and pretty convincingly too. The Golden State Warriors at number 2. They're 6.5 games back of the Rockets right now. Those are the only 2 teams that have clinched playoff spots, and it's because they've clinched the divisions, and that's literally it. Going through, at number 3 is the Portland Trailblazers. Number 4 is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Number 5 is the New Orleans Pelicans. Number 6 is the San Antonio Spurs. Number 7 is the Utah Jazz. Number 8 is the Minnesota Timberwolves, who again are struggling right now. Number 9 is the Los Angeles Clippers. And number 10 is the Denver Nuggets. The only reason I said the 9 and 10 is because it is a very close matchup. Right now, Denver is the 10 seed, and they're 2 games back of the 8 with 7 games to go. So that will definitely be an interesting matchup to look out for. And to me, who is your favorite right now? Who do you think should be considered the favorite in both the Eastern and Western conferences?
Well, I'm going to start with the Eastern. I would say Boston, but we don't know when Kyrie's going to be back. So I have to go. It's going to be between playoff LeBron and the red-hot Toronto Raptors. But I don't know, just because the new look Cavs have had their ups and they've had their downs. I'm afraid they might be holding LeBron back. So I'm going to say right now my favorite's the Raptors, actually. And in the West, it's a tough call. If Steph can come back at 100% by the second round of playoffs, I'll say Golden State. But right now, with the injuries, with the just the influx of the rosters in, I'm going to go Houston.
To me, in the grand scheme of things, there can sometimes be a difference between a favorite and a prediction. The favorite in the Eastern Conference to me right now is the Toronto Raptors. They've earned it. They've really played. They've proved all the naysayers wrong. They still got a tough schedule left to go. But if they can clinch that number 1 seed, they'll have that. And Toronto's a good place to have number 1 a home court advantage at. So they've really earned their respect going through the. And again, I know the Eastern Conference is weak, but they've held off the Cavs. They've held off the Celtics. They've beaten the Celtics, I believe it's twice now this year. So I think the Raptors should be considered the favorites in the Eastern Conference. In the West, I agree. I do believe it's the Rockets. And honestly, even with Stephen Curry, the favorites right now, it should be the Houston Rockets. They've beaten the Warriors twice with everybody healthy. And I mean, and as I just stated with Toronto, they've earned their respect compared to what. And yes, Golden State has really, and now to a lot of fans, maybe they haven't, but they've earned their respect as well. You don't only lose one game in an entire playoffs and not get respect at the end of the day. I know that people are saying, well, they got a superstar, they got the second best player in the league, one of the top 5 players in the league, go do that and be able to do that. And it's saying, well, I mean, a bunch of other teams are trying to get him too. And at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you can't respect them. They're a great basketball team. They're incredibly tough to beat. If you watch them in the regular season, not many teams. If you can beat the Warriors twice in one season, that's a huge achievement. That's a major accomplishment. And the Rockets have done that. The Rockets have done that, and one of them actually, even both of them have been pretty handily as well. So I gotta consider the Rockets to be the favorites right now, especially with Stephen Curry out. Now, my prediction wise, Cleveland's going to win the East. Playoff LeBron's going to come out. We've seen LeBron carry worse teams to the promised land before. So give me the Cavs to come out of the East. But give me the Rockets to come out of the Western Conference. I think Curry coming back, like I said, is going to be a little bit more of a problem people may think. And I think the rhythm could be a little bit off. I know with a roster of that caliber, it may not take long to get it back on track, but I'm afraid it might be too late. And give me the Rockets as of right now to make it to the NBA Finals.
Prediction-wise, I'm going to go Cleveland, obviously for the same reasons of you. And to just try to hurry up a little bit, I'm going to go Golden State, just because 73-2, lost in the finals, and the next year swept playoffs up until Game 3 of the finals. Phenomenal team, and their bench got a little bit better too over the offseason. So I'm going to go Golden State. Just simple explanation there.
Well, that's going to do it here on Hot Takes with Holmes, here for another edition. If you like what you heard, be sure to tune in again next week right here at 3 p.m. once again on Radio Free Radford. And be sure to like our Facebook page. We're also on YouTube. All of our broadcasts are uploaded there. I'm going to try to get that up there either tonight or tomorrow afternoon. So be sure to find us on both those sites. Just look up Hot Takes with Holmes. We're there for both of them. For my co-host Isaiah Addair and all the people here at Radio Free Radford, my name is Blake Holmes, and we will be back right next week here at 3 p.m.